Buenos días, bienvenidos, bienvenidas al público que nos está viendo también en streaming y por supuesto a los que se encuentran en la sala, esta sala de la aula magna de la Facultad de Comercio en el Máster de Economía de la Cultura de la Universidad de Valladolid, Facultad de Comercio. También forma parte de este ciclo del ciclo de conferencias del aniversario de la independencia india que celebra su 75 aniversario. Por tanto, quiero dar las gracias a la Embajada de la India, a Casa, Ayuntamiento de Valladolid, Universidad de Valladolid, por acoger este ciclo. Esta es la segunda conferencia a cargo de en este caso de Asad Lalljee, al quien voy a presentar brevemente. Asad es el CEO de Avid Learning, que es una iniciativa de programación cultural pública y una plataforma creativa bajo la iniciativa Asad Group. Lleva varios años trabajando en llevar experimentos, innovación y a través del marketing y posicionamiento de experiencias culturales, tanto para el público internacional como doméstico. Antes de trabajar en la India, en Mumbai concretamente, Asad ha trabajado durante 14 años en la Madison Avenue de Nueva York, trabajando en publicidad. Posteriormente se trasladó a Bombay para trabajar en proyectos de diplomacia cultural, tanto público como privadas, y crear un ecosistema de cara a la gestión cultural en un nuevo ámbito que era el principal motor de la industria cultural en Bombay. Era muy importante, pero desde una perspectiva de marketing moderna. Trabaja actualmente con festivales como el Jaipur Literature Festival, Serendipity Arts Festival y el Kalagoda Arts Festival. Asimismo, también es el director artístico, el curator de la Royal Opera House de Mumbai, que lleva una innovación al público de diferentes grupos sociales, porque su trabajo se distingue también por incluir y hacerlo inclusivo a todo tipo de esferas sociales, no solamente las élites, sino todo tipo de públicos. Y finalmente, quería comentar que él tiene un máster, un MA de la Global Marketing Communications de Emerson College en Boston. The floor is all yours, Asad Lalljee. We would also like to thank Acción Cultural Española. También queremos dar las gracias a Acción Cultural Española a través del programa de visitantes que nos ha permitido contar con Asad. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. Thank you to the university for having me and to the students for actually making the time. I know it's hard to come back to class. This is, I think, your last class before you'll finish your semester. What I'm going to do is the topic we decided to talk about was looking at cultural entrepreneurship and specifically to Mumbai or Bombay. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly take you through some background and then specifically talk about the Royal Opera House, which is what I think you'll want to hear about. And, you know, if you want to ask me any questions in the middle, please do so, you know, keep it a little free flowing. And if I'm talking too fast, which I have that habit, just let me know. I'll slow down. I know perhaps maybe I'll talk a little slower, but it's interesting that your last talks were on NFTs. I think that's what he told me. My last talk before I left for Spain on Tuesday was also about NFTs, where we looked at NFTs in music, art, and in fashion, and looking at this new disruptor that's changing the arts landscape, arts and culture landscape. I think what is interesting, I feel, and I'm envious of your students, is you all have platforms like this to learn. When people like us went into the arts, we didn't have these sort of formalized education and platforms. It was more trial and error, and we learned through that. And it's wonderful that this is a platform for you younger people who are, you know, wanting to be passionate about the arts and culture to have opportunities like this to learn. That said, I'm just going to start a presentation and go very fast. Just let me know when it's loaded. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, it's creative and cultural entrepreneurship in India, and the topic, and I mean, I will go back and forth calling it Bombay versus Mumbai. As you know, the city changed its name, and you know, when and I'll just start from the very beginning. No, you can just do next. Sorry about that. Just a second. Okay. Are you doing it or am I doing it? Sorry about that. Technology. It's your friend, sometimes it's not. So I grew up in an age like that. So if I had to make a phone call, I use that. If I had to send a mail, we use that. Music came on that. And if you were really cool, you had one of those, and I was very cool. So I had my music on that. Growing up at the time I was in Bombay, it was Bombay, and we had only two places one could go consume art and culture. One is the Jahangir Art Gallery, and the second one is the National Center of Performing Arts. It's like the Lincoln Center of New York for Bombay. So arts and culture has always been a very important part of Bombay. Bombay, as you know, is known for its movie business. It's always attracted a lot of talent. A lot of the masters, the art world, have been there. I think it's got some creative energy of some sorts. But 20 years ago, it was very different from what it's now. So, but growing up, I was what I used to call a Lego child. I used to make houses out of Lego, and that's all I did. I used to paint, but I was terrible. I used to act, but I was terrible. So the only career option I was told, okay, you can become an architect. And I said, okay, wow, I'm going to become an architect. But nepotism took over. And my father was in advertising. I decided to join advertising. And somebody told me you belong on Madison Avenue. Now, this is circa 1991. There was no Google. Internet proliferation was very, very low. People really didn't use it. And there was no Mad Men. Anybody seen the series? Yes. So that was my dream. So through graduate school, I went to graduate school with the only intent to get to New York and work on Madison Avenue. But when I reached New York, it changed me from an arts and culture perspective. When you see there's arts and culture all around you, there's theater that goes for miles and miles. There are, some things are free, some things are paid. You would have to figure out a way of involving yourself, absorbing yourself into the arts and culture world. I started getting interested in the Indian arts and culture there. I wasn't really into it when I lived in India. I think I was trying to refigure my roots. And that got me involved in a lot of organizations that I was doing something else. I was a madman. I was working in Madison Avenue. I was working for large agencies. I worked on very big brands. For 14 years, I did this. But in the evening, when I wanted to do something creative, I'd go volunteer with arts organizations, or I'd attend plays, I'd go to shows. And, everyone who reaches New York is very poor and they're all broke. So we have to figure out ways on how to get that arts and culture into your thing. And there are ways of doing it. I once ushered a Broadway show just to see it for free. And simultaneously, when I was there, I got involved with arts foundations out there. I started representing India through books in New York and actually in the US, which was, I think, my foray into arts and culture. This is just a quick background and I'll start. So I moved back to India in 2010. Now, when I moved back here, Bombay was now Mumbai. The city was different. I barely recognized it. So I moved back with a company called SRS. All the bios was read out just now. And I fell into the arts and culture formally. I was hired to be a part of a brand corporate strategies group. I found a continuing ed program within the company, and I was asked to grow it. And I said, sure, I'll grow it. And I created what I call the cultural arm of a corporate company, because just as cultural practitioners, one has also got to see how do you position the programs and the platforms that you're working on. So I took a continuing ed program and I converted it into the cultural arm of the SR group. And through that, I've had the privilege of co-curating the Kalagora Arts Festival. And when the Royal Opera House opened in 2016, I was honored to be the curator, and I've been curating it ever since. And I'll show you all some nice examples. Can we play the video? It's a little synopsis of what we do. So that's exactly what I do for the last 11 years. I do workshops, talks, masterclasses. Oh no, it has to And over the course of the years, it's grown and it's become quite an important arts and culture public programming platform in Mumbai. We do it to scale, so we do 150 programs. In lockdown, I did 240 programs online in 1 year. So it's small numbers like that. That's just to show a brand how we've changed it. But coming back to the topic at hand, now that was my background. Forget about it. When I moved back to Bombay, it had changed. It had become Mumbai. But what I learned about the city, because there was so much happening in the arts and culture space, it actually taught me about Mumbai through the arts and culture. So I actually launched a series called Multipolis Mumbai, which I did 57 episodes of. And I looked at the city through various lenses, through architecture, through music, through film, through female women, thespians, women in theater. We started dissecting the city, peeling layers and layers. And it also made me understand, and it became one of our most popular series that we did. But coming back to the topic, and obviously this is a graduate course, is I just wanted to share a few strategies that I feel has helped me and perhaps may help you all in your journey through arts management. One is collaboration. I think this is one of the fundamental things I believe in. I joke, I said, more logos, the better on a project, because it's always nicer to work with like-minded people. Doesn't matter who brings what to the table, as long as you bring something. But this is one of the fundamental things. And that's how you also build your network, you get resources. And that's something I've been doing ever since. And it's one of my fundamental things I actually do. And, we collaborate in various ways through festivals and others. And I won't bore you with these. I'll take you through some. The other point, which I was talking to, earlier, is looking at advocacy. And one can use the arts as a platform for social advocacy and policy making. I'll start with policy making. In Mumbai, we have, in India, we have an organization called FICCI, which is the Federation of the Indian Chambers of Arts and Commerce. So through them, they have an Art City, Smart City mission. Through them, I've curated many programs looking at the importance of arts for cities, especially like Bombay. You all have, Spain is more mature in this space, but in India, it was still struggling. And what we did was we conferenced it in a couple of places in Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, and we white papered it and we took it to the powers be to actually hopefully impact change. Simultaneously, just as you all are sitting here, in India, there are very few courses in arts management. So what we did was we created a seminar on creating the future leaders. I call them arts orchestrators. So again, you're using your arts and culture platform to involve the ecosystem and help promote change and kind of take it up a notch. Simultaneously, we use our stage, especially the Opera House and whatever I do, to kind of help from a social change perspective, because you have the power in you and it actually works for the better. So, for example, we've had a visually impaired orchestra from London. We put them on the stage, and simultaneously we brought in all the visually impaired students. When I say visually impaired, it's who don't have their eyesight or can partially see. Similarly, a lot of kids programs, a lot of women's empowerment programs, International Day of the Girl Child, World Autism Day, and a lot of NGOs. So a lot of NGOs or charity case, projects also need to fundraise. You help them through your arts practices to raise funds for themselves. I'm not managed to raise too much funds for myself either, but yeah. The other thing, one of my main strategies, and it's also the reason why I'm here, is cultural diplomacy. In many countries, and I think it's the same here also, you have a large diplomatic presence. Especially for Bombay, we have consulates, and in Delhi, you have the embassies. So what I do is I collaborate with the consulates and the embassies to bring in the best of international talent, because funding is always an issue. So you partner with these guys to bring talent in, which then you can program and create a meaningful event. Simultaneously, many of these organizations, these countries have their cultural arms already there. Cervantes is there, British Council. So you collaborate with these guys. Again, it's the collaboration and working in diplomacy. And with them, we've created, very interesting programs. And as it so happens is because from the flip side, the countries also want to showcase their country. And this is, showcasing the softer powers of your country. This is just a project that we had done, which was the opposite. We took India outside. This was an online photography and videography contest where I curated the photography part, where we did an online, 30,000 images came in, and the winning photographs were then placed in all the embassies in India around the world, and kind of showcasing India as beautiful, colorful, which I think is a wonderful cultural diplomacy using the arts as a platform. I thought I'll show you some of the work I've done, which you all might react to. So the Kalagor Arts Festival is one of the largest public open air free festivals. So we had curated a wonderful flamenco performance of Andalusian dance and guitar, which was very successful. I mean, we had 350 people to 400 in a room. I thought it was a fire hazard, so we had to get rid of some of them. Similarly, we've done lots of just the idea of also not just working on what you have locally, but kind of exposing audiences to arts and culture and dance forms or art form or music from other areas. So we do flamenco workshops. We've had performances where we've taken flamenco and combined it with, we paired it with Kathakali and done some fusion. So those are the sort of things that, you also have to bring relevance to what the audience is going to see, because now I think what has happened is, with the proliferation of the internet, with travel, people are more evolved and they do understand other cultures, and they're actually looking to experience it. So as arts practitioners, you all should also look at, working or taking stuff to other countries, not just in your domain. With the consulate and the embassy in Spain, we had actually curated this mini operetta, Zazuela, and this is again with the with the Spanish consulate and the embassy and Cervantes. And we got a lot of press, and it was a wonderful performance. So these are just my few Spanish examples I thought I'll just push into the presentation. But this is now, I think, is going to change what I'm going to tell you. See, I think 2020, and ironically, I was supposed to do this lecture 2 years ago in May, and then lockdown happened. And I know Guillermo is the only person who didn't stop working physically. I didn't stop working online. But what happened was, we saw a big change. But when you look at the change, collaboration, you saw people who would not talk to each other normally collaborating. See, but collaboration is not new. Zoom wasn't made for the lockdown, but everything was on Zoom. So, and technology was not new. The technology that people were using to present and work within the arts was also always there. People just started using it. It was a change in consumption pattern. It was a change in working styles. But what has happened in that since then is people are going to also find it hard going back to exactly how we were in 2020. There's going to be a new hybrid model that arises. But with this, I'm just going to throw some statistics at you all, because if you're looking at the creative economy in India, I mean, obviously TV and radio take a chunk of it, but India obviously has a large export of film and video. We're the 8th largest exporter of creative goods and the 3rd largest globally from developing countries. And needless to say, in 2021, there was a surge of amount of spent online. Social media took 33%. I mean, the penetration, all these figures are just irrelevant. It's common sense, right? People were locked, they were at home, they were going to go online, they had lots more time, they were spending more time. But from there, you have to look at it as arts practitioners. That's an opportunity for you. You have to create programs for them then, which is going to be relevant. As I said, creative consumption went out. Hours spent online increased, which is again. But this is just a nice snapshot of Mumbai. We are a home to Bollywood, which is the most vibrant film industry. 50% of all films and TV is made in Bombay, and it employs a large number of people. So you have to keep in mind the kind of demographic of the ecosystem you have when you're kind of programming from an arts manager's perspective. Now, I didn't know these numbers were going to increase. It was common sense that something is going to happen. And what I did in April of 2020 is I launched this thing called Avid Online. And in the first year, I did 240 programs. I'll just take you through some interesting formats that work for us. We did an online artist residency. See, residencies, again, not new. People were doing them. Online residencies, people were not doing them. But we created a very fun residency. We had 6 artists based in different parts of the world, coming together to collaborate, to create art. And what they did was, it was interesting. The point of reflection to start working is there to take inspiration from someone else's art. It was a fun process through Miro boards and Zooms. We did gallery walkthroughs and, all that fun stuff. And we built microsites and we presented all their work in an online thing. And we actually called it blurring boundaries, because at one point you don't know when one person's work has started and the other one's has ended. And it was a very successful show with lots of numbers online, and we hosted on a microsite. That's the kind of work that it was across disciplines. Some people made a film, some people wrote poetry, some people, it was quite cool, for at least for India. This is another project I did where in lockdown, where I actually conceptualized a children's book based on a very strong female role model that I heard of through a documentary film. She's a 50-year-old woman. She didn't know how to swim, didn't know how to dive, and in her 50s decided to do that and becomes an evangelist for corals. And she was trying to save the corals in the Gulf of Mannar. So I have a young kid, so I read her these sort of books. So I said, we need to make a book to tell her story. I just gave Guillermo this book today. But the idea was, how are you going to, your younger stakeholders, how are you going to influence them? And yes, books, everyone says books are, not as important, but I don't agree. You have to create projects that are relevant. And what I did was, so since these books were for kids, I wanted it by kids. So we workshopped this. We got 20 kids online again. No one sending their kids to a workshop, and in the peak of lockdown, we got them to illustrate corals and coral woman. And we created this book, and I got HarperCollins to publish it. And now it's being distributed internationally, and all the funds are going to coral conservation in India. So these are some of the different kind of programs one can do. And again, my collaboration, I love more logos. So just get anybody in who's going to help. And we launched this book actually physically at the Children's Museum, one of the most beautiful spaces in Mumbai. As I mentioned, we just did a talk on NFT. But what has happened ever since is we've gone hybrid. We're doing mixture of online and offline. And I'm not going to, these are a couple of my series. I won't bore you with that, but I'll go on. Let's start with the Opera House. The Opera House was built in 1916. It was inaugurated started in 1916. It was built in 1911 when King George V came to India, and it ran successfully as an opera house, a movie, a theater, and then a movie theater, and was shut for 25 years. And it was on this World Heritage Monument thing for the building that might get destroyed or fall down. So the owners, it's privately owned, privately funded, decided to spend their own money and renovate it. They took 7 years to renovate it. Now the building was closed for 25 years. So you have to put that in perspective. People had forgotten that building existed. They know the area by the name, but they forgot about the building. That's how it looked, the before and after. And I'll show you a couple of videos. Can we play that? So that's just a little summary of what we, just change the next slide. Sorry. I know you like it a lot, but skip it. Did we change? Yeah, so just leave that. So basically we won the UNESCO award for cultural heritage conservation. The idea, and this is, for arts practitioners, is you take a building that's been closed for 25 years and you bring it back. Now, looking at Opera House, it's a very elitist looking building. I mean, it's gold and velvet and, but the idea was to make it a democratic place. And, in India, unfortunately or fortunately, we can't stay as an opera house and only have opera. There's nobody going to come to it. But there's a solution for that either. But so what we did was, I was very keen, the way I programmed the place is to take the city and its demographic of its people in mind, and to do the things that defy categorization. I'm always about that. I always combine things. I don't do straight up one thing. And I'll show you a couple of things. So for example, what we did was we were doing a book launch, and the book was called Clouds. So what I did was I found an art gallery that had 30 pieces of art that were cloud themed. So I got them on a loan, and I did an art pop-up in the Opera House. And now the book launch, you're coming to a performing arts venue, you're going to sit and watch a book launch. So I actually got a group to come in and perform cloud-based songs in English, Gujarati, and Oriya. These are local languages. So you made it a more holistic kind of an experience. You take dance and music, and you can create social advocacy. This is like an Indian dance. It's like an Indian martial arts thing called Malkham. But we've done it. And here what I did was, it was an Australian director who had premiered the show at the Gold Coast Festival. I said, but how do I bring relevance to my audience? So again, using a social advocacy. There's a school for visually impaired girls, and they practice this. So I made them open it. The idea is to set the tone also for the students that, even having visually impaired, having limitations, that's not going to stop them. They can succeed more. It's more of the message that you can do with the kind of work that you do. Again, I mentioned the visually impaired orchestra that I paired up with a pop-up of Braille art. So, when the students came in, they could actually check out the art. This, we launched the Beatles in a book, which I believe you'll have had some work in a year also on it. But even with them, I mean, I got, people who are not professional musicians, but people who have actually jammed with them before to come on stage and perform. And, you also have to give your stage to newcomers, to people who haven't had the opportunity before. I've actually curated a whole series called Cultural Capitals, where I don't put all the usual suspects. We look at the smaller cities in India and what are they doing culturally to put the city on the map. So we're looking at smaller cities like Hyderabad, or these may ring a bell, or Banaras, which are very culturally rich cities. But what are the younger people doing? Because very often, at least in India, it happens is when people have these conversations, it's the same usual suspects who are speaking. But the young people like yourselves are doing such amazing work, pushing that envelope, and also, which I think is quite cool. So we've done 14 episodes in that series. Again, you take theater and you combine it with art. These were kind of interesting. You all saw some of it in the video. We put large sculptures on stage. We had live painting happening, haiku, dance. You kind of recategorize the way you present an evening, and we've done that a couple of times. So I'll take you to something called formats. You do festivals. And this is one thing I'll just spend some time on. As I mentioned, opera is not in our vocabulary. But what, as arts practitioners, I think what one has a responsibility to do is also educate your audience. And in a way, you make them grow as you grow. So what we started doing, at least for opera, we did an opera 101, then we did a 2.0, then we did an opera appreciation workshop. Like that, we keep doing programs trying to educate people on a particular genres, theater appreciation, jazz appreciation. I'm doing, in 2 weeks, I'm doing a screenwriting workshop for our film audiences, because now with OTT, the whole dynamic has changed. I've also incorporated fashion in the Opera House a lot. In fact, that slide is coming later. We have an Italian dance troupe coming to the Opera House on the 4th of June. And so what I suggested, and they were doing Antonio Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And I said, okay, but an Italian dance troupe in India by itself, yeah, it'll work. But why don't we layer it? So what I suggested doing, we got an Indian designer who has some Italian roots to come in and showcase Four Seasons in fashion. So there's going to be the dance and fashion, and she's actually going to dress the dancers. And then they'll all come together, hopefully. It's on the third or fourth, so I'll let you know how that goes. But the idea of defying the definitions, like, when I did my opera season, which I'm going to show you, one of the things I did at the opera season was I met a young fashion designer. He was young and struggling, and he wanted to do a press conference at the Opera House. And I gave him, you have to help the youngsters. It's very important. So what I did was I told him, okay, in return, you give me 12 over-the-top gowns. I put them on mannequins and put them all around the Opera House. So the idea, and we use social media, that's something I'll come to, hashtags of what did she wear, night at the opera, to create this additional layer to promote an art form that's not very popular. So it dimensionalizes it. Another thing is we do a lot of symposiums because I think education is a very important part of what we do as practitioners, as I keep mentioning it, because you have to keep growing the audience with you. Different formats like round tables. I mean, it's a square table, but, bringing in heritage practitioners, bringing in people. So, again, opera is not that popular. So what I did was I created a series of 5 programs. One was we did an opera appreciation workshop. The second, we did the Rossini tribute, which was a performance, obviously. We created an opera walkthrough. Why? Because I wanted to bring people into the opera house to kind of even experiment with opera. So what I did was, and that was our main opera, we did a talk on conservation on the opera house, and we had somebody talk about opera. And then we had the fashion pop-up. We had badges, balloons, all that fun stuff, thinking they're at the Met, but they weren't. But that's the idea. I think, will they change? Okay. So this is some of them. We created badges. Just, you have to have fun. You have to dimensionalize the projects we do. From a marketing perspective, outreach is extremely important. And, yes, you have to go and you have to do all the traditional press and get write-ups and get, reviews and all that fun stuff. But I think as a youngster once told me, I was trying to hire her to do my PR, and she looked at me, she said, social media is the new PR. And I thought of it and I said, so true. So I think you cannot, now you'll be a dinosaur if you don't, but you cannot not do your arts without a very strong social media plan, policy, put funds towards it, because that's what is making the difference these days. Traditional stuff is changing. So interesting kind of programs that you could do online. And obviously post-pandemic, that definition has also changed. Just a quick digression. So in 2020, for Mumbai Opera, also we started an online program, but I was very clear, I'm not doing online music performances, because the only reason a performing arts venue survives is if you're sitting in that chair. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. But I took the other part of it, which is education. So we started programming small snippets of videos on various topics, jazz appreciation, art of the sitar, art of physical theater, small 7-minute videos, 20-minute videos, and you just push them out through Instagram and then on YouTube to kind of keep your audience engaged. Because, 2 years, if they can't come to you, they may forget you because they've only come to you for 6 years, 4 years up till now. And we curated a lot of very interesting film festivals online, which is really working. We did one on sustainability, one for children, and we just won a documentary film festival. Again, lots of talks looking at East-West culture, collaborations. And now we're back to normal, and we've started our programs again. We just did 2 book launches on Bombay. This was interesting, is you also have to experiment as practitioners, not that with timing. For the first time, we decided to call people on a 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday to the Opera House. So I said, who's going to show up there? We had a house full. So it's just also experimenting with formats and times. This was Blanca Lee's Electric, which was part of the Bonjour India Festival, which we had at the Royal Opera House last month. And this is the one I was mentioning, where we're taking the Italian dancers and we're merging it with fashion. So fingers crossed, it will work out to be an interesting event. I know you all are suffering for this by now. So I will end my presentation and take some questions. And I hope you'll have some nice questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asad, for this overview of not only the work that you've done, and congratulations for your wonderful work, but also about the scene in general of how Bombay is becoming a real cultural capital of India and in fact of the world. Can you let us know about a little bit, I know before coming here you mentioned your work or presentations in the blockchain and how the blockchain and the tokens have influenced or may influence also in India the Bombay cultural scene and the cultural industry.
I think it was I mean, I'm always inquisitive to learn something new, and I've been reading about crypto. I've been reading about masters artworks are going to be dropping as NFTs. Now it all sounds lovely when you read it, but does anybody really understand it? So I think something just happened, and I got this email from a friend, and her son is doing NFTs in music. And I said, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So I built a program around it. It just happened on Tuesday, as I mentioned. But it's very interesting to see what is happening in that space. It's so, I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying what I heard on Tuesday. It's unregulated in a way, but it's still there and you cannot ignore it. Everyone said, yeah, people have lost money with the crypto crash that's going on. But a lot of artists are doing a lot of cool, interesting stuff. And it is not for, I mean, I would say it's the Gen Z audience, but people say it's even the younger than Gen Z audience who are into it. Now, if they're into it now, I mean, and the alpha, the kids, 10 years old and all are buying. I don't know where do they get the money to buy these things from to start with. But if they're already starting to think of it, and they're your future stakeholders of the arts, they're not forgetting about it. So I think it's a very interesting proposition. I don't think it's, the beyond and end all of life. You see formalized auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, playing in the space, this whole metaverse persona. I mean, I asked the panelist who was making NFTs for fashion. She said people are collecting it for their personalities in metaverse. They buy a pair of clothes to wear every day, and then they buy one for their online avatar, which I thought was interesting and weird simultaneously. But that is the trend. That's what people are doing. And so through this whole conversation, we joked about it, but I'm actually going to do it. Is I'm going to go drop an Avid NFT. So what will give access to people who buy the NFT exclusive programs that I have to offer. But that kind of goes away from my democratization of the arts, which is what I really believe in. So I'm like still working the kinks out, but I just want one to be cool. So.
Any questions?
Sure.
So you've talked about how you do the outreach from Indian culture to other countries, and we see a lot of Asian markets like South Korea and such expanding, and by the soft power of movies and music, working to increase tourism in their countries. I wanted to know if you believe that these outreaches and the power that Bollywood has impacted Indian tourism in any way.
I think the power of Bollywood, one can never question. See, I mean, one should ask the tourism people, but I definitely think it has. I mean, years ago, when I first reached New York, Meera Nair had made this movie called Monsoon Wedding. And every time they meet me and they say, oh, you're Indian, they first thought I was Lebanese. I said, Asad, when you're getting married, we want to come to India for a monsoon wedding. So I was like, no one gets married in the monsoons to start with. But by the time I came back to India, they said, Asad, I thought of you yesterday. I said, why? Because I watched Slumdog Millionaire. I said, why would you think of me? But Bollywood, because it's an export, it's all over the world, it's being exported out. The stars from Bollywood are now so entrenched into Hollywood and other ecosystems that I think the relevance of Bollywood cannot be questioned. It's there to stay. From a tourism perspective, yes, people saw that marigold flower thing. They all want to go to or eat, pray, love. They all want to go do that circuit. But I think it's more than that. If you show the beauty of some countries, and on the flip side, in India, and Bollywood did a movie called, I think called Silsila. It was shot in Switzerland, and all the Indians, I mean, who could afford it, started running to Switzerland. And there was another movie which was shot in Spain, And suddenly Spain was on every Indian's map, I mean, who wanted to go out. So I think obviously films have a large effect on people. I think right now films, because of OTT and because of a lot of independent people, are creating things which are more, some of them more meaningful. It definitely has a power, but I'm not sure if it's directly correlated with tourism. But you're getting more aware. People write about India. People see Indian fashion is on the main runways. So food, Indian food. See, food is also culture. We've not spoken about that, but it's omnipresent. So people do know what it is, and it's beyond now the elephants and the peacocks. I think that story is a little old, but still there. So. Please.
So the other question that I have is that if in India, I don't know what about theater in India, and I wanted to know if the big productions like Broadway stars productions and things like that, if they're imported to India, there's this.
See, those are, I mean, it's a very good question.
Can you repeat the question for the online audience?
It's about import of large productions from Broadway or the West End to coming to India. I can talk about Bombay. See, these productions are huge and very expensive. We had one thing which is not Broadway, but we had Cirque du Soleil come to India, and they created a project and they called it Bazaar. I don't know why they named it Bazaar, but it was to relevance. You're sitting in India, maybe put a little Indian element to it. And I mean, what's happening is, see, a lot of Indians are mobile. There's a lot of disposable income in certain segments of population. I can't say generically everyone's traveling. So everyone's more exposed. They understand and they want to experience that. So when Cirque du Soleil was there, it did very well. It was very expensive, very highly priced, but people went. I went twice. I was invited once for free, to be honest. But those came, but those are elaborate things, and you have to do the whole tour. Broadway, I don't think there are talks, there are new venues opening that are looking at bringing in these big Broadway productions. But I think it will also be nuanced with some Indian cast or whatever. They're supposed to come, and I just feel that they're amazing if they can come of a certain quality, but at the end of it, the financials need to work out. Ticket sales basically doesn't cover most of the, at least in India. See, when the Indians go to Broadway and West End, they'll pay $300 and buy a ticket and watch a show. But if I try charging them $300, it's just, can you give me a free ticket? So it's still a learning curve. It's early, but I think it'll happen in the next few years. People are trying to demand it. Yeah.
Could you please check the questions in streaming? But I have another one question.
Sure.
Maybe you have said in the presentation, but I didn't notice. This institution, the Royal Opera House, is a public institution, private institution. What are the fundraising or the budget of this institution?
Sure.
And on the other hand, I would like to, have you received critics for being a kind of institution to include or to introduce the Western civilization, Western culture, and not the inside culture, the Indian culture?
True. So two questions.
Yeah.
Two questions. One is about the ownership of the Royal Opera House, and two is about critics and criticism of the work you do. So to start with, the Royal Opera House is privately owned, privately funded. It's been owned by the royal family of Gondal since the 1950s. And the Maharaja, we live in a democracy, but the Maharaja and Maharani of who own it, they're from Gondal, which is a small princely state in Gujarat. And they've been ahead of their time. They've been doing a lot of cultural heritage conservation across all their properties. So they decided to restore the Royal Opera House and give it back to the city. To give it back means restore it and use it as a performing arts venue. But that said, they put in all the funds to restore it and keep restoring it and maintaining it. Old buildings, to keep them in that prime conditions takes a lot of money and a lot of work on a continuous basis. That said, opera house in a construct is a performing arts venue. It's a venue for hire. So essentially, we have to get people to hire it. But what I do is I do that, but then I make it worthwhile for them through the work that we do. I think it's a collaborative ecosystem. There's some events which I do, which are mine, which most of I've showed as events that I have curated and come up with. But we also have a lot of people who rent the space. Yeah. Right.
Open windows.
So the second part is, and so there is no curatorial budget, which is the issue, but I believe one has to work around the limitations one has and figure. The second part. On stage, I mean, I really don't take that all too seriously. You just do good work, put out good energy, get the community involved, get people involved, give the the talent, the younger people a chance to perform, and it all falls into place. So I really don't listen to them too much.
May I just repeat? His question was a little more specific. It's about whether if you are asked to do a percentage of Western and Indian content, Western has a percentage to be Western and Indian, or is it?
No, I actually do. I don't look at it like that. I just look at, you have to be opportunistic also within the arts, because there's no reason. The resources are limited in India, at least from where I come from. So whatever, I mean, if I find a project interesting, I do it. I mean, essentially, you have to put on as cultural practitioners. One also has to look at what your audiences are going to come for. There's no point creating something if you have 4 people sitting in the audience. So if I find something, an interesting project that I think is going to add value, is going to help, I do it. I don't think whether it's Western classical, Indian classical. That's why I keep fusing things up, because for me, that works better to make the projects more interesting. And that's how I think I've managed to make the opera house, a building that was close to 25 years, to make it back into, a cultural hub is an interesting task. But yeah.
Excuse me, and do you have a kind of permanent season of spectacles or music, theater, and so on, or this is just a hub for receiving different?
We are open 365 days. We don't have things happening 365 days. See, weekends are always, there's something happening Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And in the weekdays is when I try, to also look. In the afternoons, we do afternoon formats, we're doing matinees, things we're going to do. So I don't have a season, because I wish we could plan like that, but it's the funding. So I just keep month by month, 3 months, start putting it on a calendar and start filling up that calendar. And then hopefully at some point when India gets to a mature stage, we could have seasons. But we're a privately owned, privately funded platform. So nothing online?
No.
Not yet, but there might be emails which you can respond to. Pues, si no hay más preguntas, cerramos la sesión. Damos las gracias una vez más a la Facultad de Comercio de Valladolid, la Universidad de Valladolid, por acoger el evento. And of course, we want to thank Asad Lalljee for making time in his busy schedule to come to the city, to come to the TAC Festival, which is happening now, Festival de Teatros y Artes de Calle. También damos las gracias al Ayuntamiento de Valladolid por colaborar en todas estas iniciativas y en el máster. See you again soon, maybe with a new project,
Yes,
and as part of our master's courses. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you for having me.